Admiral Zena Vex stood before the holographic display, her scaled fingers tapping against the crystalline command console of the Drachnid Empire's flagship. The readings from Earth made no sense. None at all. "Play it again," she commanded, her secondary eyes narrowing as the surveillance footage began to loop. On the display, hundreds of millions of humans sat in their homes, their eyes fixed on screens, their fingers dancing across primitive input devices as they commanded virtual armies, navies, and space fleets in simulated battles. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Lieutenant Crowell materialized beside her, his translucent form flickering slightly, a sign of his agitation. "They spend approximately 3.2 billion hours per week engaged in these war games." Vex's primary heart skipped a beat. The implications were staggering. They're training their entire population for war, but disguising it as entertainment. "That's not even the most disturbing part," Crowell continued, pulling up another dataset. "These simulations, they call them games, they're not just about combat. They're about resource management, logistics, squad tactics, grand strategy. Some of them even simulate governing entire civilizations from stone tools to space travel." The Admiral's scales shifted from their usual azure to a troubled gray. "How long has this been going on?" "Decades. Perhaps centuries. We've tracked the evolution from simple board games like chess to these complex digital simulations. They start training their young as early as 5 years old." Vex felt a chill run down her spine. The humans had found a way to turn warfare into entertainment, to make it addictive, to ensure their population would willingly spend countless hours honing their combat skills without even realizing they were being trained. "Show me their actual military," she demanded. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's conventional armed forces. They seemed almost primitive compared to the Drachnid fleet, combustion engines, ballistic weapons, basic space capabilities. "This doesn't add up," Vex muttered. "Why maintain such primitive forces when they're clearly capable of?" She gestured at another screen showing a human teenager commanding a sophisticated space battle simulation. "Perhaps they're hiding their true capabilities?" Crowell suggested. "No." Vex's scales shifted to the deep purple of revelation. "They're not hiding anything. They're so confident in their abilities that they don't feel the need to build advanced weapons. Their minds are their weapons." She brought up the statistics again. Billions of hours spent in strategy games. Millions of humans simultaneously coordinating complex military operations for fun. Children learning resource management and tactical thinking before they could even write. "Send word to the High Command," Vex ordered, her voice grave. "The humans don't treat war like we do. They've turned it into a game, and they've been playing it their entire lives. Each of them has commanded more virtual battles than our most seasoned admirals have seen in reality. Surely you don't think their simulated experience could match real combat?" Crowell's form flickered with disbelief. Vex called up one final piece of data, the success rate of human gamers when presented with novel tactical challenges in their simulations. The numbers were frightening. "They don't just play these games, Lieutenant. They master them. They break them apart and rebuild them. They find exploits and optimal strategies. They theorycraft and min-max and do things we can't even comprehend because we never thought to turn warfare into entertainment." She closed the holographic display with a sharp gesture. "And now they're starting to look to the stars. We need to decide what to do before they decide to start playing their games in reality." As Vex stared out at the blue-green planet below, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had already spotted them. After all, what was one more alien invasion scenario to a species that had been repelling them in simulations for generations? The real question was, were the Drachnids ready to face an entire civilization that had been unknowingly preparing for this moment their entire lives? A civilization that had turned the art of war into a game, and then mastered it billions of times over? Vex had a feeling she already knew the answer, and it terrified her. The first Drachnid probe breached Earth's atmosphere at 3 o'clock GMT, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. Nearly. Marcus Wong, a 19-year-old college student in Singapore, was the first to notice something was wrong. He wasn't using any sophisticated military equipment, just playing his favorite space combat simulator when he noticed an unusual pattern in the game's starfield backdrop. "That's not supposed to move like that," he muttered, quickly capturing footage and posting it to the Gamers Unite forum. Within minutes, thousands of other players had spotted similar anomalies in their games, tiny distortions in the night sky that matched no known astronomical phenomena. In orbit, Lieutenant Crowell reported to Admiral Vex with growing concern. "They're tracking our probes." "Impossible," Vex dismissed. "Our stealth technology is based on principles their science hasn't even discovered yet." Nevertheless, Crowell insisted, bringing up a human internet forum, "They're discussing it. Look at this thread titled 'Anyone else seeing weird clipping in the sky?'" Vex's scales rippled with annoyance. "They think it's a glitch in their games. This proves nothing." But as she watched, the humans' discussion evolved rapidly. Someone posted a comparison between the glitch and similar visual artifacts from a game called Mass Effect. Another user overlaid the anomaly patterns with theoretical models of gravitational lensing from something called Elite Dangerous. "Admiral," Crowell's voice took on an urgent tone, "they're crowdsourcing our stealth technology's weaknesses through gaming references." Before Vex could respond, a new alert flashed across their screens. Thousands of amateur telescopes around Earth had suddenly turned toward specific points in the sky, points that perfectly corresponded with their probe locations. "How?" Vex demanded. "Who's coordinating this response?" "No one," Crowell replied, his form flickering rapidly with agitation. "And everyone. They're self-organizing through gaming channels. Look at this." The screen filled with chat logs from various gaming platforms. Players were treating the situation like a new alternate reality game, sharing information, forming impromptu teams, and applying problem-solving methods they'd learned from years of gaming. "They've turned our invasion into a game," Crowell observed, his voice filled with disbelief. "And they're playing it better than we're executing it." In New York, retired game developer Maya Patel received an unusual email from a former colleague at NASA. "Remember that zero-day exploit you found in Cosmic Conquest? The one that let players detect cloaked ships? We need to talk." Within hours, the gaming community had essentially crowdsourced a planetary defense system. EVE Online players calculated probable attack vectors based on gravitational disturbances. Minecraft engineers designed and shared 3D models of the probe's likely structure based on its environmental effects. Speedrunners from various games collaborated to optimize Earth's early warning response times. Back on the Drachnid flagship, Vex watched in horror as humanity's gaming expertise transformed into real-world military efficiency. Her carefully planned stealth reconnaissance was being systematically dismantled by millions of humans who thought they were just playing another game. "Launch the first wave," she commanded, her scales darkening with determination. "Let's see how they handle actual combat." The response came faster than anyone expected. As Drachnid ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, they were met not by panic or chaos, but by an eerily coordinated defense. Civilian pilots executed maneuvers that seemed pulled straight from space combat simulators. Ground forces moved with the precision of an RTS campaign. "Admiral," Crowell reported, his voice shaking, "they're adapting faster than our tactical AI can compute responses. Their strategies, they're using techniques that our war simulations classified as impossible or irrational, but they're working." Vex watched as a squadron of primitive human fighters executed a perfect pincer movement on one of her advanced destroyers. The maneuver shouldn't have worked, it violated every principle of space combat tactics. Yet it did work, because the humans weren't following the rules of conventional warfare. They were following the rules of games, where the impossible became possible through perfect execution and exploiting system mechanics. "They're not fighting this war," Vex realized, her scales paling to an ashen gray. They're speed-running it. As if to confirm her fears, a transmission cut through their communications channels. It was a simple message, broadcast on all frequencies in the universal format, GG easy. Vex didn't need a translator to understand the implications. The humans weren't just ready for this fight, they'd been practicing for it their entire lives. The United Nations Gaming Command Center, hastily established in what used to be the League of Legends World Championship Arena in Shanghai, hummed with activity. Thousands of screens flickered with real-time battle data, while former esports professionals coordinated Earth's defense with the precision they once reserved for tournament finals. Gene Quicksilver Park, 5-time StarCraft world champion, stood before a holographic display of the Asian theater, his fingers dancing across the control interface with practiced ease. At age 45, he'd thought his competitive days were behind him. Now he was commanding actual armies against an alien invasion. They're using a Zerg rush strategy, he announced, his voice carrying across the command center. Standard type, 2 swarm formation. I've countered this exact pattern at least 10,000 times. Beside him, Elena, War Queen, Petrov, legendary EVE Online fleet commander, nodded in agreement. Their tactics are theoretically perfect, but predictable. They're playing like AIs, not players. On the main screen, waves of Drachnid fighters swarmed toward Earth's defensive line. In response, human ships executed maneuvers that seemed to defy physics, because they did. The pilots, trained on decades of space combat simulators, knew exactly how to exploit the edge cases of real-world physics in ways the Drachnids had never considered. Admiral Vex watched from her flagship as her forces were systematically dismantled by tactics that made no logical sense. They're using their fighters as bait, she hissed, scales fluctuating between rage red and confusion purple. Drawing our forces into, what are these formations? Lieutenant Kral's hologram flickered as he consulted the tactical database. According to human gaming terminology, they're executing something called a kiting strategy, combined with animation canceling. They're exploiting the reaction time limitations of our targeting systems the same way they exploit frame data in their combat games. In the Gaming Command Center, Maya Patel had assembled a think tank of speedrunners, players who specialized in completing games as quickly as possible by exploiting every possible advantage. Their task, find the exploits in reality itself. Look at their shield regeneration cycle, one speedrunner pointed out, drawing on years of experience breaking game systems. There's a 0.3-second window when they have to redirect power. If we time our shots precisely. The information spread through the global gaming network. Millions of players, now turned war strategists, began coordinating their attacks with frame-perfect timing. Each strike hit during that fraction of a second vulnerability, a technique perfected through countless hours of boss fights and PvP battles. Meanwhile, in orbit, Marcus Wong led a squadron of retrofitted civilian spacecraft, their movements choreographed like a perfectly executed raid boss strategy. Remember, he broadcast to his team, this is just like that impossible bonus level in Galactic Thunder. They think their attack pattern is unbeatable because mathematically, it should be. But we know better. His ships executed a series of maneuvers that the Drachnid tactical computers classified as suicidal, until they worked. Just as gamers had been finding ways around impossible game mechanics for generations, humanity now applied those same principles to actual space combat. Back on her flagship, Vex received increasingly desperate reports. Her forces were being countered not by superior technology or numbers, but by strategies that no military commander would ever consider viable. Humans were treating the laws of physics like game mechanics to be mastered and exploited. They've turned our own ship's energy distribution system into what they call a combo system, Kral reported, his holographic form nearly transparent with distress. They're chain-stunning our vessels by timing their attacks to interrupt our shield reset animations. Those aren't animations. Vex roared. Those are fundamental engineering principles. To them, there's no difference, Krau replied softly. They've spent their entire lives looking for patterns to exploit. Now they're doing it to us. In the gaming command center, Jean watched as another Drachnid formation fell to tactics pioneered in virtual battlefields. You know what their biggest mistake was? He asked Elena, as they coordinated the next phase of Earth's defense. What's that? They thought we were practicing war through games, Jean smiled, his fingers never stopping their precise dance across the controls. But really, we were playing games that taught us how to think beyond the limitations of war. As if to punctuate his point, a massive Drachnid dreadnought exploded in orbit, taken down by a maneuver that any military strategist would have dismissed as impossible, but that any gamer would recognize as a perfectly executed speedrunning strat. The message was clear: humanity hadn't just been playing games all these years. They'd been breaking them, mastering them, and rewriting their rules. Now they were doing the same to the very nature of warfare itself, and the Drachnids were learning a harsh lesson about the difference between perfect tactical execution and the creative chaos of human gaming expertise. Admiral Vex's flagship bridge had descended into chaos. The holographic displays showed impossible scenarios. Human forces were now actively hunting her fleet using tactics that seemed to violate every principle of space combat doctrine. They've adapted our own technology faster than our simulations predicted possible, Krau reported, his holographic form barely maintaining coherence. They're calling it reverse engineering the meta. Vex's scales had settled into a permanent state of distress gray. Explain. In their gaming terminology, they're treating our entire military doctrine as a game system to be analyzed and countered. They're not just fighting us, they're optimizing their strategy against us. On Earth, the gaming command center had evolved. The walls were now covered with what gamers called theorycraft, complex mathematical formulas and pattern analyses that broke down Drachnid military responses into their component parts, treating them like game mechanics to be mastered. Maya Patel stood before a virtual whiteboard, leading a session with what she called her exploit hunters, a team of gamers who specialized in finding unintended advantages in complex systems. Look at their ship's quantum communication network, she pointed out. The packet transmission sequence is nearly identical to the netcode in Stellar Siege 3. Which means it can be lag-switched, completed a young hacker who'd made his name finding exploits in competitive gaming networks. If we flood their command channels with garbage data at precisely the right moments. In orbit, Gene Park's fleet demonstrated the results of this analysis. Human ships executed maneuvers that deliberately triggered predictable responses from the Drachnid combat AI, then exploited the milliseconds of computational lag to strike at newly discovered vulnerabilities. They're not even fighting anymore, Vex whispered, watching another squadron fall to what the humans were calling a wombo combo. They're styling on us. Elena Petrov's voice cut through the Drachnid command channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. Would you like to enable tutorial mode? You seem to be having trouble with the basic mechanics. The psychological warfare was as devastating as the tactical innovations. The humans weren't just winning, they were treating the entire invasion like a game they'd mastered, complete with taunts and performance scoring. Marcus Wong led a strike team deep into Drachnid territory, using formations derived from speedrunning strategies. Remember, he broadcast to his squadron, this is just like breaking the world record pace. We're not trying to fight them traditionally, we're exploiting their response times to clip through their defense grid. The Drachnid tactical AI, designed to counter conventional military strategies, found itself completely overwhelmed by human approaches it couldn't classify. Ships performed bunny hop maneuvers to maintain momentum while changing direction. Fighters used animation canceling techniques to fire weapons faster than their cooling systems should allow. They've turned physics into a game engine, Krau observed, watching humanity systematically dismantle the most advanced military force in known space. And they're better at exploiting it than we are at using it properly. In the gaming command center, Jean and Elena coordinated the global counteroffensive. Gaming clans transformed into military units, applying years of raid coordination experience to actual combat. Minecraft engineers repurposed their redstone expertise to optimize power distribution in captured Drachnid technology. EVE Online corporations leveraged their experience in space logistics to manage Earth's defense supply lines. Admiral Krowl's voice was barely a whisper, "They're starting to mod our own ships." Vex's secondary hearts nearly stopped. What? They've cracked our engineering protocols. They're treating our technology like an open-source game engine. They're already sharing blueprints on something called Steam Workshop. The final insult came when human forces began achieving what they called sequence breaks, using physics exploits to bypass entire sections of Drachnid defense platforms that should have been impenetrable. This isn't war anymore, Vex realized, watching her carefully planned invasion crumble before what the humans were calling pro-gamer moves. We're just NPCs in their game now. A new transmission interrupted her thoughts. It was footage from Earth, millions of humans watching the space battles on streaming platforms, cheering every victory like it was an esports tournament. They had transformed an alien invasion into the ultimate multiplayer game, and they were playing it with the skill of a species that had spent generations practicing for this exact moment. Admiral Crow reported, his hologram flickering with resignation, "They're starting a speedrun competition to see who can capture our ships the fastest. The current world record is 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Vex's scales shifted to the deep blue of revelation. They had completely misunderstood humanity from the start. These weren't warriors who practiced with games. These were gamers who had just found a new platform to master, and they were playing to win. The Drachnid High Command received Admiral Vex's final report with stunned silence. The holographic display showed their once mighty invasion fleet reduced to a handful of ships, surrounded by swarms of human vessels executing maneuvers that defied military logic yet proved devastatingly effective. They've turned the entire war into what they call an achievement hunt. Vex's transmission crackled, her scales a kaleidoscope of confused colors. They're competing to accomplish military objectives in the most stylish way possible. Yesterday, a human squadron captured one of our dreadnoughts using only civilian mining vessels, just to prove they could. In the gaming command center, Maya Patel's team had fully decoded the Drachnid battle network. Their entire military operates like a poorly optimized RTS game, she explained to the assembled commanders. Fixed build orders, predictable tech trees, no adaptation to meta changes. They're perfect, and that's their weakness. Gene Park nodded, understanding immediately. In gaming, perfect play is predictable play. And predictable play can be countered, Elena finished, already coordinating the next phase of their offensive. The humans had evolved beyond simply defending Earth. They were now speedrunning the entire war, treating Drachnid military doctrine like a game to be broken and mastered. Each engagement brought new strategies that no military simulator could have predicted. They're sharing our tactical data on something called Discord, Crow reported, his holographic form barely maintaining coherence. Every weakness we have is being documented, categorized, and countered. They're writing strategy guides for fighting us. Marcus Wong led what the humans had dubbed the final raid boss assault on the Drachnid command ship. His fleet moved in patterns that seemed chaotic but were actually precisely choreographed, like dancers performing a deadly ballet in space. Remember, he broadcast to his team, "This is just like that impossible bonus level everyone said couldn't be beaten. The one we all stayed up for weeks trying to crack. Only this time, the physics engine is real." The assault was streamed live across Earth's networks, commented on by former esports broadcasters who had seamlessly transitioned to narrating actual space battles. Millions watched as humanity's gaming expertise transformed into military dominance. In her flagship's command center, Vex watched the end approach with a mix of horror and fascination. "We thought we were dealing with a primitive species," she mused to Crow. "Instead, we found a civilization that had spent generations perfecting the art of breaking complex systems." Admiral, Krau's voice was heavy with resignation, they're offering us terms of surrender, in the form of a tutorial video. With commentary. The video played across all Drachnid ships. It was a detailed breakdown of every tactical mistake their invasion had made, complete with slow-motion replays and analysis from top gaming strategists. The humans hadn't just defeated them, they had turned their defeat into a teaching moment. But the most terrifying part, Vex continued, her scales settling into a deep shade of understanding, is that they're still treating this like a game. Even now, they're theory-crafting new strategies, finding more efficient ways to counter our technology, sharing builds and tactics. The final blow came not from a weapon, but from a message. The humans had fully decoded the Drachnid quantum network and were now flooding it with their own data, billions of hours of gameplay footage, strategy guides, speedrun videos, and combat tutorials. We didn't just lose a war, Vex realized, watching her fleet's AI system struggle to process the flood of human gaming knowledge. We became part of their metagame. In the gaming command center, Jean, Elena, and Maya watched as the Drachnid fleet raised the universal signal of surrender. But the humans weren't done. They had already begun sharing strategies for optimizing post-war diplomatic relations, treating peace negotiations like an elaborate multiplayer co-op mission. You know what their biggest mistake was? Maya asked, as they watched the Drachnid ships power down their weapons. They thought games were just entertainment, Jean replied, understanding immediately. Exactly, Elena nodded. They never realized that every game we've ever played was teaching us something fundamental. There's always a way to win. You just have to be willing to think outside the tutorial. As the Drachnid fleet prepared to withdraw, they received one final transmission from Earth. It was a simple message, one that encapsulated humanity's unique approach to both gaming and warfare. Thanks for the practice round. Ready for PvP? The message was accompanied by an invitation to join something called the Intergalactic Gaming League. Because in the end, humanity hadn't just won a war. They had found new players for the ultimate multiplayer experience. And somewhere in the vast database of human gaming history, a new achievement had been unlocked: First Contact Speedrun, World Record Holder, Humanity.